the last video, we covered how to texture and color lines using LNZPro. Now I'm going to show you a little bit about using paintballs. So I'm going to go ahead and add a few paintballs to this cat, and I will probably speed up this section of the video so you don't have to watch in painstaking detail as I do this. Just a little tip here, guys, that if you want to have a very visible chest patch on a breed like the Aussie that has a small chest, you can put paintballs on the inner shoulders. I'm not going to do that today because I don't actually want a big chest patch, but just a little tip there for you. I'm coming to the end of adding the white now. Just going to give it a little face streak marking as well. If you want to get things to blend in and look more like it would look on a real cat, a great way to do that is to add these sort of patches of color to break up the shape of the ball in joints. And I personally, you can just mirror them in LNZPro and save yourself work, but I personally tend to like to actually make them asymmetrical because that's how they would be in a real cat. Okay, my white markings are all sorted out, my blue is in place, and now I would like to add a little bit of cream. Something to keep in mind while placing paintballs is that, generally speaking, they will appear a little bit smaller in game than how they look when you place them in Pet Workshop. So if you're doing a small little detail, try and just go a little bit bolder than you maybe think you need to. Okay, I think I'm happy with this now. I will stop here. Keep in mind that I'm going to have it with have the texture over the top. So you actually won't be able to see the paintballs as clearly defined as they are here. I'll put this up for download, and if you do want to try and mess with it, take the paintballs and put them on another cat, for example, or something like that, you're welcome to do so. Okay. Once you've placed paintballs in Pet Workshop, you need to anchor and texture them. In this particular example, we have paintballs in 3 different colors. We have the white paintballs that are on the undersides here, and we have the blue paintballs, which are in the transition areas, and then we have the cream paintballs, which are all over the body. I want the cream and blue paintballs to be the same texture as this base area, and I want the white paintballs to be the same texture as the legs that we started out with. So that means that this area is going to have the mottled 2 texture, and this area is going to have the mottled 5 texture. Now I'm going to go ahead and show you how to do that. You must do this stage in LNZPro, and a really important thing to remember is that if you then open up in Pet Workshop, you will lose some of what you've done in LNZPro. I will show you exactly what I mean just in a second here. So let's save this, and I'll load up the Oshi in LNZPro, go to Lines, OR is the adult. Scroll down. Now the section you're looking for is the paintball section. So here we go. These are my paintballs. There are rather a lot of them. Also, these are the paw pads. So the paw pads you're going to leave alone, though I am going to change the color of the paw pads, and I'm just going to do it manually here a second. Okay, so what you're going to do now, I'm just going to show you how to do this in Notepad, but before we begin, let me just show you the columns here. So what we have is, again, they're labeled at the top, and you have the base ball. So this is the ball that the paintball is on. So for example, 46, you can check in our ball chart here. Remember the ball chart, you get to it by going to Help, Pet Editing, and then it's under General Editing Information, Ball Numbers, and remember the dog chart is the top one and the bottom one is the cat chart. So if we go to ball number 46, it's here, it's one of the tail balls. So it's the last ball that I added paintballs to. As you add paintballs, they get added on top. You can actually change this setting in Pet Workshop. So let me just quickly show you that. If I select a ball to add paintballs to, I'm not going to actually do it. I say add. Then you see here that there's an option to add on top or underneath. So if you add underneath, just remember that you did so, because they will show up underneath the paw pads, and you don't really want to anchor, or, well, you might want to texture the paw pads, but you don't want to anchor them, and I'll explain that in a second. But you would want, if you saved any paintballs under here, you want to cut them and paste them just in this space here instead. All right, so going back to these titles here of the columns, we've got the baseball, we've got the diameter, and it's a percentage. So when you are placing paintballs, you'll notice that even if you have them set consistently to 30, if you go to a larger baseball to add the paintballs to, the paintball is going to be bigger than if you go to a small ball and add a paintball to it. That's just because the size is not an absolute size, it's proportionate to the ball that it's being placed on. Then we have the X, Y, Z coordinates, and that's just telling you where on the baseball it is. So you can manually change these. It's a bit difficult to visualize, so I think it's easier in general to work with Pet Workshop, and then if you want to change something you can, but this is also how you would mirror things. You just change the sign on this and it'll mirror them. Obviously you have to copy them first. Then you have the color. So the color is going to be really important now because it's going to be how we can determine how we texture each of the balls. I will show you that in a second. And then you, generally speaking, are probably going to only be interested in the fuzz. In addition, I just kept the fuzz at 4 for all of these, just to have a little bit of a natural outline. And the last column right now is the texture. And as you can see, the texture is by default -1. -1 means there's no texture. Let me just move these along so it lines up. There we go. -1 just means there's no texture, and there might be times when you want no texture. But in this case, we want to change it. So I'm going to go ahead and just select all of these paintballs. And I will open up Notepad. Now, I have another program called Notepad++ that I usually use, but I'm just going to show you this in Notepad because everyone has that, I think, on their computers. You have Windows. So now we have our list of paintballs, and we need to go and check our texture list here. Or you can also see it, remember, you can see it here in Pet Workshop, but I like to just see it here, it's easier. So the cream and blue paintballs, we want those to have this texture. And on our list, we count from 0, that's 0, 1. So it's texture number 1. So what we want is for all the cream, if I select this, instead of -1, to have a 1 there. So I'm going to say replace. I'm going to paste in that line of code that I just copied, which is the same for all the balls which have 40 as their color. And I'm going to say replace with, I'm going to put that in, I'm going to change this last one to 1, and then I'm going to also add a 0 onto the end. And the reason you add the 0 onto the end is that this anchors the paintball. And what that means is that it's not going to move around as much in the game when your pet moves around, makes the ball much more visible. If you do this to paw pads, they then are visible from the side, which you don't want. So that's why you leave the paw pads out of this and you just work with the paintballs that you've added. Obviously, there might be exceptions to that. It's down to what you want to do. Go ahead and click replace all, and it will do exactly that. Replaces all of these lines from the 40 onwards. And if I scroll down, we should find, there we go, the 110. So the blue areas have not been changed. We're going to change them as well. Same thing. So again, change this to a 1. Add the 0 on the end. I tend to add 2 spaces, but you don't need to. You can add however many spaces you want, and actually you don't even need the commas there. In a pet file, if you open up a pet file, you'll see that there are no commas. So that's really just a habit from editing breed files. You don't actually need to do it that way. Okay, so the 15 balls, we don't want those to be textured with the number 1 texture. We actually want them to be textured with mottled 5, which is if we count 0, 1, 2, 3. So we're going to change this last number from a -1 to a 3. And again, we add the 0 to anchor. Okay, there we go. So these are now all our paintballs, and all the paintballs textured and anchored. I'm going to select all, copy them, go back to my breed file, select all this again, and just replace it with my paintballs. So if you do this and you save, and then you go ahead and you open in Pet Workshop, okay, it doesn't look any different because Pet Workshop doesn't support anchoring or texturing of paintballs. But if I now save this in Pet Workshop, if I load that up again and we look at our paintballs here, you see that it has removed the anchor. So either keep your paintball notepad open and be ready to replace them in, or just try and make sure that the paintballs are the last thing you do, or the anchoring of the paintballs is the last thing you do, just to save you a little bit of time. Okay, so I'm just gonna make sure that I can save the most recent version as this one. And now we can go ahead and look at it in our game. Okay, orange short hair, and there you have it. Very cute little Oshi with the blue and cream. However, I said that I wanted to have one of the textures be semi-transparent. So I'm gonna go and change that. If I go back, I don't need to close that, remember. I'm not going to change it here, because if I change it here, I'm gonna have to save it and I will lose my anchoring. I'm going to go down here to the texture list, and I'm just going to change this texture. I want it to have a transparency of 65. And actually, I'm not just going to do that. I'm going to change the texture to this texture. Yes, and then I will make it 65. There we go. And I will save it. It's as simple as that to change textures. I will go into changing textures in LNZPro in another video in more detail, but it's very simple to do it from here. And here we go. There's our finished Oshi. And I like the look of this, but I actually would kind of like to have the blue areas not have the texture on and just have the cream areas have it. So how about we go ahead and actually do that? Let's change it. Okay, so we're just going to go ahead and do that. We're going to change the texture of the blue paintballs to be the same as the white paintballs. So again, I'm going to select this, copy, go edit, replace, delete what's already there, and paste this in instead. Do the same with this one. Make sure that there's nothing else written there. And then all we need to do is change the 1 to a 3 and replace all. There we go. Yeah, just check that it's all correct. It looks fine. So select all. Go back here. Of course, you can just do the specific section, but I'm just showing you guys, and then save. And now if we open up our game, remember, it can just be minimized, provided that the Oshi isn't out. Now we have a cat that has cream paintballs with that texture on, but the blue paintballs are still intact. That doesn't affect the base, by the way. The base is still textured how it was originally, with the mottled texture, with the semi-transparent mottled texture. If I wanted to change that, I could, but that's a little bit of a longer process. I will go ahead and do that. And when I put it up for download, it will be like that. Thank you for watching. And please feel free to offer suggestions if you have anything that you'd like me to do a tutorial on in the future, or if you even just want to see something like a speed hex or something I'm hexing sped up, one or the other, then just let me know and I will try and do that.